This is the fellow passenger. Today, this video is not really about anything other than me making some music and talking a little bit about hardware. I'm also going to talk a bit about why I haven't posted anything for a while. So maybe we should just call this video a philosophy episode. I haven't posted anything for a bit. I apologize for that. I have been thinking about posting. What would be interesting to post? What do I have to say? Sometimes I feel I don't have anything to say, or I have a lot of things to say, but I don't know how to say them. I started a bit of a thing at the beginning of the year. I posted a video about my Behringer 2600 and a few hacks and things that I've discovered using it. And it's something that I began with this year. I wanted to explore one piece of kit at the time. Although I know that most of the things on this channel is hardware. No, sorry. It's about Ableton, it's not about hardware. But I have a lot of hardware. Well, what is a lot? I have some hardware that I've accumulated over quite a long period of time. And I think it's worth talking about hardware sometimes. Doorless jamming, things like that. What difference it makes if an artist you are seeing are just behind a laptop, or if they're using some form of physical setup that might be interesting for the audience to see. So I did my video on the 2600, and as a next synth to explore in depth is a synth that is fairly new to me. I acquired it sometime last year. It's a Yamaha SY22. It's certainly not new. I bought it secondhand very cheap. I got it for £110. And it's a synth that I had heard, the Yamaha SY22. I'd sort of seen it before, but it was not something that I never ever even looked into. It looks really anonymous. If you haven't seen one, it's a black keyboard synth from some, is it early 90s maybe? Maybe late 80s. It looks really anonymous, no knobs or sliders. It doesn't have that traditional inverted commas cool synth look. If you have not heard of the Yamaha SY22, I'm going to tell you about it now. It's a vector synthesizer. And what does that mean? It's got a joystick, and what that joystick does, that you can fade between different patches. So you can choose whether you want to run 2 patches or 4 patches at any one time. So when you press a key, all the patches will play, but depending on where you position that joystick, you set the volume of the different patches, so you can do a little bit of a blend. 2 of the voices are 2 operator FM synths, and 2 of the voices are 12-bit sample based. Quite lo-fi, crunchy sounding. It is not a sought after synth at all. But I think it is maybe a little bit of a hidden gem. It's got one feature that makes it slightly more unusual, other than just having that 12-bit, probably also the early analog to digital or digital to analog converters, making it sound crunchy and punchy in a digital way. But the thing that makes it quite special is that joystick that allows you to fade between the different patches that you run at the same time, the 4 different synth voices are they called partials or parts or something? You can record that joystick motion depending on how high resolution you want in that recording, depending on how long you can record that motion for. So if you want a really high fine resolution, it's very short. I can't remember what it is, but it's a matter of, like the longest one is just a matter of seconds. So you record the motion, you do it by hand, and then after that, every time you press a key, that motion recording will automatically play back. So if you create 2 quite crazy 2 operator FM patches, and I think you can do quite a lot with just 2 operators, you can get some really gritty, weird sounds out of it. The other thing, which was maybe the biggest surprise, like, do you know the artist Maurizio? I think is it Moritz von Otzwald's dub techno project, 90s, gritty, heavy. It just sounds, that's what I want dub techno to sound like. Or yeah, one of the big names that I like. And when I take the default patch, the init patch of the SY22, and then do one of those motion controlled things using record the motion of the joystick, and then I play back a D minor chord, it's just got that vibe. I don't know, I have no idea if that's what he might have been using, but it's just got that sound, add a bit of compression, and then you can take an auto filter in Ableton, and it's just it just sounds good. So I've been playing around with that, and it's been one of those things. I was like, oh, shall I do a video on this? And the answer is probably, yeah, I should, because I think it is a synth that is perhaps not used in a way that I think is the most interesting. As with most FM synths, actually, I think a lot of them were made to try to sound like, hang on, just before I just hold that thought, I just need to work out, can you set something here to react to velocity? Is it in here? Pitch bend, modulation wheel, pressure, slide, mallet volume. Oh, here, velocity. Let's do. Okay, so where were we? We were talking about synthesizers that manufacturers try to replicate real acoustic instruments And the fact is that FM synthesis is amazing and you can do amazing things with it, but at best it's just going to sound like an extremely plasticky, cheap acoustic instrument. So I think a synthesizer should be given the right to do its own thing. And that's when they stand out and become really interesting. And that's what I want to do with the SY22, and I think it deserves it. And for £110, I think it is a steal, because it sounds so different from, it doesn't sound like software, and it doesn't sound like that many other synths out there. So yeah, maybe I should do a video on that. But I've been thinking about, like, what makes it interesting to you? What makes it interesting to me? What would I say about the SY22? I haven't really come to that conclusion. I realize I'm just sort of rambling a bit much now. So let's just move on to talking more about hardware. The fact is that it might be the case that a lot of people desire hardware for mojo, that sound, especially wanting to choose something analog. But I think I've come to the conclusion that the fact that it's being analog is maybe not where the vibe is necessarily hiding. I think it is about something else. I've realized that a lot of digital synthesizers, and especially when I've started exploring some of these old FM synths now, they have a different sound. They don't sound like software. And I've also realized that it is something about these sort of old electronics that if you make a patch in Ableton with any of the stock synths that come with it, and you take that signal and you route it outside of Ableton and into some old effects or an old mixer or an old compressor, just a cheap one, it does something to the sound. It just makes it come alive. And I would say that a sound that is made in Ableton and run through an old 90s effect box coming back into Ableton can have more mojo rather than, let's say, a Korg Minilog, which I think is a synth that is good. You can make really nice patches very, very quickly. But it sounds a bit like software. It sounds very clean and sterile in comparison. So I think there's maybe other ways you can reach that sound. And thinking about the digital effects and things that I was talking about, there are some 90s effects that have reached some form of stardom, like the Alesis Quadraverb, for example, or the MIDI Verb 2. But they they're not necessarily, don't get blinded by those ones. Yes, they are great. I got a Quadraverb here that I've borrowed from someone, but there are lots of other unsung heroes, I think. I got a Zoom, what's it called? Hang on. 1204. Old 90s effect box that I think sounds amazing. The same with the brand Art. They're still around, I think. I think it's the same company. They make, I think, like compressors and stuff like that now. Check out their Multiverb or any of those. They have done a whole bunch of them, and they go for really cheap online, and they really add that vibe. I also got some old guitar pedals. I got a brand called Autechre. I got the Super Delay and a compressor pedal. It's not a brand that was ever particularly hyped. Hang on, why is this? Let me just find out what's going on here. Anyway, I also got the Mackie CR1604 mixer, not the VLC models, it's the one pre-VLC, VLZ. Running stuff through there and just overdriving it using the EQ just sounds fantastic. And all of these things are very cheap. Like those effect boxes, I mean, the pedals, they go for like, I don't know, seem to go for like 30 quid each. And I got the Alesis 3630 compressor, which is the famous Daft Punk compressor. That one is, I got it for £30 or something. I don't think it's considered to be a quality compressor, but it just adds mojo to stuff. So I think it's worth looking at those sort of things. And the same with vintage digital synths. There's so many very cheap ones. And I think, look, don't necessarily always just go for the ones that, you know, someone has picked up and made some amazing stuff with, that's officially been announced, like there was this piece of equipment and therefore it's become really expensive. There's so many good pieces of kit out there. I picked up, I mentioned the SY22, which, yeah, I appreciate. It's not for everyone. Some people hate it. But the TX81Z, the Yamaha FM synth, out of the FM synths that I own, I don't know how many do I have, like 7 or something. That one, I got it for £140 on eBay. And to me, that's the one which got the most punch and grit and really does not sound like software. I think it's such a bargain. Just pick one up. Or there's a keyboard version called YS200. There's also YS100. I think the only difference between them is that the 100 doesn't have a built-in sequencer. Basically, it's got the same waveforms as the TX81Z or DX100 or DX11. I think they all have those additional waveforms. But this one has also got an additional sequencer in and digital effects, really crappy ones. Crap in a good way. No one has talked about those synthesizers. They still go for super cheap. So there you are. I think there is a lot to be said for some hardware, but that also maybe creates a little bit of a division in my personal opinion about hardware. What hardware is worthwhile? I somewhere know that I got too much. I got too much hardware. And that I'm going to sell some, but I've been thinking a lot about, like, how do I decide what to sell? And I think I come to the conclusion either it's about workflow, something that allows me to do something more efficient than just sitting down and doing it in Ableton. For me, because I've just become so used to Ableton that I feel that I can usually do most things very quickly there. Or it's about the sound. Does it provide a sound that I just cannot get in a more easy way than just using Ableton? And that automatically leads me into thinking about modular. And I have a couple of modular Eurorack racks cases. Let me see, I'm just going to drop a little bit of a groove in. I have a couple of Eurorack cases. I started my Eurorack journey in 2015. I started it in 2015. And I think the last few modules I bought was maybe in 2022. I don't think I bought any last year. And I have to confess that I don't use the modular as much as I used to. If you look at my Instagram and go back in time, it's mostly just modular stuff. But what happened? Why? As you know, that the Eurorack is seen as being something that can be quite addictive. And yeah, totally. And in 2015, there was an opportunity for me to jump on that addictive bandwagon, because you need some modules to be able to start unless you buy a semi-modular or something. And DV247, the online music shop, I think they had a special deal where you could buy something over a 12-month period interest-free. At the same time, as I bought like a case and a few modules, and a friend of mine was also able to lend me a bunch of modules, so I just had enough to get started. And that set me off in 2015. I found it extremely exciting. I had been practicing online. I think I used the voltage blocks or whatever it's called from, is it Native Instruments? I can't think of what it's called. Is it Tractor? That's not what it's called, is it? That's some DJ thing. I can't think. Reactor, that's what it's called. Voltage blocks. Just so I understood the basics of how to use it. So when I got the modules, I had an idea of the basic concept of how to start patching. I was stuck in a bit of a rut. Rut is not the right word, but I was stuck in a way of thinking I could patch a subtractive, basic subtractive synth voice. So it's just like an envelope controlling the VCA, and maybe one envelope controlling the VCF, and then, you know, like it just sounded like most synths do, I suppose. Then one day, I don't know if it was any particular day, but a friend of mine just started talking about these other creative ways of patching. For example, you take a square wave oscillator and you plug it into a clock divider, which then can divide that signal in two. So all of a sudden you get a sub oscillator because you sort of slow it down. Or that you can use a sample and hold circuit as a bit crusher. So you put whatever sound or music through it, and then depending on how often you ping that sample and hold, you just get a lower and lower resolution out, and it just sounded really interesting. And all of a sudden that just opened a door in my head of just how to think creatively about modulation and patching. And that changed the way I use Ableton completely, because all of a sudden I started translating those techniques into Ableton, and the biggest thing that did was probably that all of a sudden I was not stuck in a 4-bar loop anymore. Because the modulation that I could apply all of a sudden made that 4-bar loop much more animated and alive and interesting. The other thing that I learned on the modular was to start doing more generative ideas, and I could take those techniques and start applying them to Ableton as well. There was one thing in Ableton that I was really missing. That was some form of randomization, like a sample and hold, but that I could apply to anything, which pretty much I use the expression control for nowadays. There was an earlier version of expression control, but I believe that didn't have the random effect in it. So a friend and a colleague at the time helped me make the Prandom Map 5 Max for Live device, which you may have spotted in some of my earlier videos if you've been watching those. And that in turn, for example, I just started modulating all sorts of stuff. So I did, let's say we can just do it now, actually, it could work quite well. If you've been watching my videos for a while, let's add an expression control with random. I like to modulate the delay time, but also realize if I turn the repitch off, rather than getting those psychedelic repitches, you can get a really robotic effect, especially if you have quite low delay time. And that made me want to do that in my Eurorack as well. And then I realized that, there is the 4MS dual delay module, which does exactly that. It's a delay module where it doesn't do the repitching. So there was, over a few years, there was quite a lot of, I worked something out in Ableton, and then I wanted to be able to do that in the Eurorack. So for example, I wanted to do the frequency splitting, which we should actually do now before applying this echo. Let's just take the quickest way to do that. Well, not necessarily the quickest way, but a way of doing that is to take a multiband dynamics. Let's put that before the echo. I'll group that and make 3 copies. The lowest one I solo the bass, solo the mids, and then the top one I solo the highs, which means that all the bass I can keep in mono, and then I can put an echo on the mid frequencies, which might even be in stereo. We can set that to ping pong. But it doesn't affect the lower frequencies, which often you don't want to do bass in stereo. And I wanted to do that in I wanted to do that in Eurorack as well. So I think it's called LA65 or LP65 or something like that. That does exactly that. It doesn't do in the compression, but it splits the frequencies into 3 separate section bands where you can set the thresholds of the different bands so you can treat them differently. And there was a lot of going back and forth, and I started to think I want to make a case, a Eurorack case that I can use for live performance. So I started putting that together and realizing that after a while this was like a lot of doubling up. And I also realized, like, during this, because it had affected me so much how I use Ableton, that I'd become much quicker at doing a lot of things in Ableton, and it was just more flexible, and there's less of a limitation depending on, like, if I want another LFO, I just grab another LFO, which is not as easy in the Eurorack. In a way, it's good because you're restricted and you become really creative within the boundaries that you have. But it just became less and less of a benefit of using my Eurorack, because there was so much of that I could just do in Ableton quicker with less hassle and timing issues or whatever. And also to do with what we were saying before, I think a lot of the Eurorack modules don't have not necessarily, they sound good, but they don't have that mojo that sets the sound apart from something that is just made in the box. Certainly doesn't apply to all modules. Some I've got a Klangbauer Röhren VCA, which has got an old Soviet tube in it, and that's really nice for saturation and stuff. And also a Twin Peak analog filter, which you ping, and that just doesn't sound like software. But for a lot of the other stuff, for the 4MS effects modules and things like that, and the Basimila Satiritus Alter module, which is really popular among a lot of people, I feel like I can make more interesting and varied percussion sounds quicker in Ableton rather than using that. And I did perform a few things using the modular, but I think especially thinking that it would be more interesting for the audience. But I've been wondering, like, how many in the audience care about whether I stand behind the laptop or stand behind the Eurorack case. I think some definitely do, but if the music is bloody magical and that me as a performer can use the tool that I got in front of me, whether that is a laptop or a Eurorack, to live react to how the audience is reacting, to create to create a sonic landscape that develops and reacts to the audience in a way that is interesting, then all of a sudden I think the fact of standing behind the Eurorack is less important for most people. And depending on what sort of venue you're playing in, people might not even see the devices you're behind. They probably see that you're there, but they don't necessarily see exactly what you're doing anyway. So I think that's why the Eurorack has become less important to me. I feel fairly certain that I will sell some, but I've also decided that I don't think I'm ready to just like, okay, I'm just gonna drop the whole Eurorack thing, because it might just be a phase that I'm going through and maybe I'll fall in love with it again. So I think time will tell, but at the moment I am not drawn to it. And that thing of it used to be years ago that I would wake up in the morning and have an idea for a Eurorack patch, and I just had to go and do it. Or like during the day at work, I would just think about interesting things to try, and as soon as I got home, I couldn't wait. I just couldn't wait to just try it out on the Eurorack. But I don't feel that anymore. Not with Eurorack anyway. I can certainly still do that with other hardware or with Ableton. Even with stock stuff in Ableton still. Although maybe it has diminished a little bit. I think maybe that's also why I haven't posted that much. I haven't been as inspired lately. There is a thing, I don't go clubbing very often, sort of hardly ever anymore. But there was, when I did in those days, there was a thing, like if you were somewhere and they were playing amazing music and you just got into some sort of zone and it was just so good. It could be like, got home super early in the morning and rather than going to bed, I would go and try to capture that feeling. But as I don't go clubbing anymore, that doesn't quite happen. And I don't miss the clubbing as such. I miss that feeling of feeling about music, but I wouldn't get that from clubbing quite anymore. It's just probably an age thing, really. It's just the novelty has worn off at my age. The other time when that could materialize is back in the day, going to a record shop. Maybe the people in the shop received some new promos, they were listening to them in the shop, and all of a sudden it's like, gosh, what is this sound? And the record shop might have a decent sound system as well. And the same, it could fill me with the same sort of feeling, but I don't go to record shops that often anymore. Partly because there aren't quite as many record shops anymore as there used to be. I still can get that feeling if I go to an online shop like Juno or Rubadub or something and listen to new releases. Sometimes I'm sort of filled with that feeling, and especially if you are doing the stream online and it's a bit MP3 compressed, there's just something about that. It's not audio compression in terms of a compressor plugin or a piece of hardware. It's just compressed in terms of bits in the computer, and it just sounds a bit crunchier. And it's like somehow that just that sounds good. I find it quite hard to capture that vibe. And I've been thinking about it. When you hear some of that music, sometimes it's very simple in terms of, in inverted commas, it's simple because there's maybe not that much going on and the sound design is not necessarily very complicated, but there's something about it. It's just capturing something that keeps it interesting, even if hardly anything is actually changing. And what is that? What is it that makes it? So for example, the stuff that I'm playing right now here that I'm making does not have any of those qualities at all. It just sounds incredibly dull. It's dead. And why does it sound so damn boring? I don't know. Because it doesn't necessarily sound wrong, as in dissonant wrong. It just doesn't have the mojo and vibe. And it's something that I would like to become better at creating. I saw a video, I'm going to put a link to this in the description, a few days ago from NAMM at the Electron booth. The YouTuber, is it Ricky Tinez, who I think usually makes more like deep house and stuff, but he's demoing the Digitact going into the analog heat effects. And there's two parts to it. Like the stuff that comes out of the Digitact sounds like it could be an Autechre track. And then when he runs it through the effect box, it just like amplifies that feeling. And I was just like, gear acquisition syndrome. I need those pieces of kit. But I also realized that it's less about those pieces of kit. It's about something else that I need to capture. It's like, does that beat have swing? I think it does have some sort of swing or shuffle. Look at the clip and say what you think. And I realized that I hardly ever use shuffle. So I've actually put some in here. There's a lot of other things that I like. Why is my music boring? Partly it's probably because it's more boring to me because I tend to go to the same tools and techniques over and over again. Maybe I've just become too comfortable. I go to the Operator FM synth. I use the expression control absolutely all the time. I often go for the D sharp minor pentatonic scale. Easy ways out. But I think that also makes my music sound in a particular way. The other thing is that the distortion in that analog heat sounds fantastic. And I don't use distortion that much. I tend to use a bit of saturator just to sort of amplify and add some upper harmonics. But I am not good with distortion. And by that, I don't mean that I don't like it. I'm not good at using it well. So it's something that I would like to learn. So I've decided to move forward. I need to become more adventurous in my music making. I need to become an explorer again. Pick different keys, different scales, choose different effects. That doesn't necessarily mean that I need to give up on the effects that and tools that I like, but they should maybe not be. I should maybe not always just take that easy path, because it's just too easy. And maybe that will make my music feel more interesting to me again. The other thing I realized that when I'm not very good at making something sound aggressive but still good and not just bloody childish, that it just sounds like it's got the grit and edge to it. Maybe it's just because I've just become too old. And as part of that journey, I've also realized that the vibe is often, especially if you listen to those vinyl releases, we're talking about like listening to stuff from Juno or Rubadub or whatever, Bleep. sort of online record shops, because a lot of those releases, they don't sound like a lot of the stuff that if you go onto like some random music mix on YouTube, or the stuff that is presented to me through Spotify. I would like to emphasize presented to me, because some of the things that you find on these record shops, if you go and deliberately search for them on Spotify, I find some of them and they still sound quite interesting. Everything is not there. And some stuff that just comes out on vinyl just too easily flies under the radar. So to create those vibes, it's something about the production of those. And I've been listening to and I realized like I need to try to up my production game. Also, by the way, do you hear this noise? I've worked out that obviously it becomes very amplified because of the OTT, but the Mini Freak VST, even the default patch passes noise through. Why is that? I don't understand. This beat is stupid, isn't it? Anyway, I started doing loads of tutorials online on mixing. And I think I have become a lot more I've become a lot better at mixing. But a lot of those tutorials have pushed my sound much more towards, if you're listening to some, I don't know, like generic club music on YouTube, some mix, it sounds sort of too, everything is so too organized and put into its nice little place and doing its right thing, but it also sounds quite dead. But I don't regret this, because I think that my next step is to spend some time putting some music together where I actually mix it in that way, and then I run it through my hardware to then add the mojo. So hopefully that should maybe clear up most of the unwanted mud and create the right sort of clarity, but it will be roughed up by the hardware. Maybe. Theory. I don't know. Another reason why maybe I haven't posted that many videos recently is because I have a studio in my garden. It's like a little garden room. And the electricity and power bills in the UK are quite ridiculous at the moment, and probably, well, not just only in the UK. So I've decided not to heat the studio too much. I'm actually in the studio today for the first time in quite a while. So I've set up a little mini temporary setup indoors, and that was also one of the reasons why I thought, oh, it's a good idea to take the opportunity of doing one synth at a time, because I got a small audio interface in the house. It's not the type of space that I've got out here where I can have everything plugged in, so it also helps me focus a bit more rather than being distracted by everything in the studio. There are a couple of things that I have learned in this journey looking at my my mixing more than mastering at this stage. Well, mastering as well actually, but I've been looking at my stereo spectrum, and I realized, like, even if I try to push my bass into the center and then let other things sit a bit wider in the mix depending on what they are and how important they are in needing to be in the middle. And I realized, comparing my final mix to another production of a track that I like, I've realized that my mix is not as wide as a lot of other people's. So I've been playing around with that a bit more. So for example, you saw here, I just decided to, in the return channel, I got 2 reverbs with slightly different settings, and they are hard panned left and right. And someone was saying that it's about contrast, and therefore it's good to pan them hard left and right, because that's going to create a much more big contrast rather than just panning them slightly left and right. So that's going to make the mix feel much wider. What was the other thing that made me think about? I also realized, like, a lot of my stuff is like way too bass heavy. Some of those are far too long. Oh yes, now I remember. There was something I felt like I could never get my reverbs to sound in a way that I quite wanted them to. And especially listening to released music. And then I saw someone, or heard someone saying, and I think there's something to this, I rely more on one reverb or like now in this case 2 reverbs, but in a return track. So anything that needs a reverb goes through the same reverb, which it does 2 things. One is, rather than having multiple reverbs, because I used to sort of not think much about it, some went through the return effects, some channels I'll just like chuck a reverb on and just tweak it to whatever. The 2 things, like, I think if you have a return effect, like the original signal still goes off to the master. So you get a clear version of the sound rather than having something that is sort of somewhere on a dry wet scale with a reverb. So you miss that clarity. The other thing is that having multiple reverbs creates mud buildup. And I've suddenly realized that the reverb effects that I'm looking for sound much more like the type of reverbs that I would like. That's the story. All right, I'm just going to do a little bit more music, and I think we can also talk a little bit about why. Why making music? A few years ago, 2 years ago, not even 2 years ago, when was it? 2022? Was it 2022? I can't remember anymore. I did something really scary. Maybe not scary for some, but it was really scary for me. I quit my job. I had a permanent job at a place that's there were nice people there, but there was something about the job that, just short and simple, I needed a break. I needed not to be there for a bit. So I decided to quit. Not knowing, not having a plan, I just quit. And I decided that I just needed a bit of a break. And I made music, because one of the things that the job had stopped me from doing was music. And it made me feel a bit guilty. Why did it make me feel guilty? Because I make shit like this, and shit like this does not pay bills. Or does it? There has been an amazing support from you guys, that people have actually, to me, it's just mind-blowing that people have signed up to my Patreon, and I've had so many nice messages, and people have enjoyed what I have to share, and mentally that's made a big difference. But also, even though that's by far does not pay all the bills, but it helps to bridge that gap. I've been lucky to have some freelance contracts of other things during last year that's really helped, but I wouldn't say I'm in a stable economic situation. So I really appreciate all the help you guys have given me, and I really would like to continue this journey and become better, so I can give more better things for you guys as well. But I think it's important in all of this that I'm doing this for me, and that, gosh, this just sounds incredibly selfish. Let me try to rephrase it in a nicer way. I make music because I need to make stuff. Even if I wasn't paid a penny, even if I would have that job that I quit, I had to make music. And if that meant being up at unsocial hours, or saying no to social things, or sometimes even letting friends down, saying like, no, I just need to make music. It's almost like some sort of addiction. It's not only music. There's other things I do as well that I just absolutely need to do, like drawing and cooking and stuff. I have to make it, because otherwise I'll sort of die a little bit inside. It's just amazing that I've never become better than this, because I should be really good at making music. But anyway, so if I'm going to continue, I feel I need to develop musically for my own sake. And as a byproduct, that should give me things that I can share with you that hopefully helps you on your journey. And whether you're in a position that where you dare to quit your job or whatever, but I think there is a thing where you realize that I never thought I could do anything with anything that I actually love doing, and slowly turn that into something that could potentially be what I live off. I'm not there. I still got a really long way to go, but seeing the evidence that it's just heading in that direction, just taking those baby steps, amazing. I don't know what I'm saying. It sounds like I'm getting a bit sort of sentimental. I don't want to do that. Not rubbish like that. I haven't even finished the track. This sounds like whack. It sounds rubbish. Let's just I think I've almost run out of things to say. I don't have any more wise words for you. If you have any tips to solve any of the things that I've mentioned that I would like to, like cool things to do with distortion, whether that is with Ableton native stuff, if there are some other plugins that you think that I should check out, or if there's anything about things that you've seen that I should look at, please let me know. And also, if there are things that you're really curious about, like maybe there is something where it's like, I would love to do this, but I have no idea where to look and what to do it. Please let me know. I can't promise that I have the answer, or I can't promise that I would be interested in solving it, but I would love to hear the things that you're curious about, because maybe it's something that I will be curious about too, and I can then steer my direction in terms of what I'm investigating. That creates a bit of a beep. I think that's the bit crusher probably, but I'm going to own that beep. I'm just going to own it. I'm going to pretend that I love that beep. I am not going to try to do any form of, oh no, what did I do? No. I'm going to put things on the master that I shouldn't be doing. Does this have a dry wet? Is this, no, blur? No? Okay. I can do this. I couldn't find a dry wet, so I'll make a dry wet. Oh no. This is ideal. This is what I want in my life right now. I need LFOs. I have no idea if this video has been of any interest to you whatsoever. It's just been me rambling. Again, maybe it was more for me to... I don't want that one. I want this one. Maybe it's just been more for me to reflect and ventilate a bit. things that you shouldn't do on the master, I am doing on the master because I can. I want to. Something weird is happening in the stereo field. And do you know how we solve that? We do this. We do another one of these cheat things. We take the multiband dynamics. And yeah, I understand that this is I should have fixed this earlier in the mix, because now I'm sort of squashing signals and all sorts of things that maybe shouldn't have been put into stereo in the first place, but now they are in stereo in the first place, and I squashed them together just because I can. That we can put other effects on. Actually, I can do this very neatly. I can take this would probably be a nicer way of doing it. I put this on maybe just the mids, and so the bass doesn't get squashed like that. Will that work? And then just drum bass on everything. I dread to think what this waveform looks like. Oh, it's not as bad as I thought it would be. That was probably not even worth... Oh, actually, I turned this off, didn't I? I'll upload this project file to my Patreon if you want it, realizing that I'm using third-party plugins, premium ones that you need to pay for. But yeah, I think you still be able to open the project file, but God knows why you would want to have this in the first place. It's such a mess. Yeah, I don't know if I can even say, did you enjoy this video, because I'm not sure that would be the right thing to say, but I'm going to say it anyway. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'm going to make more videos, maybe not like this one. So thank you very much for reaching all the way to the end, and I hope you have a good rest of your day, evening, night, morning, or whatever it is that you're watching this. Goodbye.